Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session with Christian Mischler. Christian is a founder and partner at the Swiss Founders Fund. Christian, can you kindly let our audiences know a brief background about you and what your project is about, what the SFF is about?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So my background, I'm Swiss originally. I've been entrepreneur since I was 16. Started my first company, small IT company. Then I started another company when I was freshman at university, which by now is one of the largest publishing house in Switzerland. Then I started a recruiting company in Sweden. Then I moved to Asia for Rocket Internet and started a food delivery company there called Food Panda, where I was global COO and CTO. Then thereafter started a company called Guest Ready, which is an Airbnb management company. And along the way, because some of these previous companies that turned profitable, together with one partner, we've set up a company called Swiss Founders Fund. So Swiss Founders Fund is basically a early stage investment fund where we invest into high growth tech startups, predominantly in Europe and in Asia, in particularly the industries of like property tech, hospitality, and travel.
You seem to have done so much. I mean, so far. So I think so far, when you listed the companies, I think I've counted nothing less than 10 companies thus far. Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we continue on the SFF, I would like to touch briefly on the your Airbnb management company, Guest Ready. Basically, I was curious to understand how it works, considering the fact that when I travel, I simply go onto my Airbnb app and book an apartment and then travel.
Right.
So I begin to wonder, how does Guest Ready plug into that?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So towards like the guest, nothing changes. As a guest, you go to Airbnb and you book your accommodation. But we've seen over the past few years, originally Airbnb was about like, letting your second bedroom and make some extra income. And more, it's moved towards actually you get the entire property, right? You don't actually stay with somebody and live like a local in that sense, but you actually get the entire place, and it's more like a serviced apartment service that you get from or like through Airbnb. And with that also the traveler's expectation has been going up. So people expect to get like hotel quality service in terms of like the linens and like the check-in, check-out. Sometimes you even get like breakfast included and all of that stuff. So for like a non-professional host, this is getting increasingly difficult to actually deliver these services. And that's where Guest Ready comes in. So Guest Ready is basically taking, apartments, investment properties, and puts them on Airbnb and manages them on behalf of the owner. So we do like everything from like the guest communication, the yield management, listing on like booking.com and HomeAway and Airbnb, coordinating with the guests, do the check-ins, check-outs, the cleanings, the linen service, everything. So that it's basically hotel quality that we deliver for Airbnb apartments.
That's quite interesting. I bet you must be a regular Airbnb user to be able to look into that and find a business opportunity.
That's right.
In that particular tiny crevice of real estate, basically. Now back to SFF. I would like to know, what was your motivation for setting up the Swiss Founders Fund? And from the name, which is basically based on Switzerland, I want to believe you started off with Swiss enterprises before thinking of expanding into Asia. And do you have plans of expanding into other parts of the globe, maybe North America, South America, Australasia, and probably even Africa?
Yeah, so the original motivation was basically, that together with that one partner in Swiss Founders Fund, we've started companies in the past. And essentially, when you start a new company, it's always the same, right? No matter in which industry you're in, you always fight with the same challenges, because you have to, get started, build an MVP of a product, you have to incorporate somewhere, you have to set up like the finance processes and all of these kind of things that we've done numerous times in the past. And I think we've become quite confident and quick in actually doing this. So we have like sort of this expertise that we can help these early stage companies to really get off the ground. And in addition, we have these profitable companies, and instead of paying us like high salaries that we don't need, we basically take these profits and we reinvest them into new companies where we either really trust the team, we know the team really well, and have like a good sort of business idea and the concept that they want to launch, or we understand sort of like a business, but the founders are maybe not that experienced, and we can really support them with our own experience and help them by joining the board, for instance, and as said, take them off the ground sort of. So this was the original motivation, and since then we started that in 2013, October 13. So it's been now about 5.5 years. We've made about 25 investments to date. And so these have been mostly in Europe and in Asia, because these are the two markets that we understand best. We've found the companies in both on both continents. We have made some early investments also in Australia, so it's definitely also a market that we're confident in. I think the US or like the Americas in general, it's maybe not something that we will focus on going forward, because the competition is like really high, also in terms of like seed stage and early stage investing. It's also not a market where we have like naturally an exposure to, because we're not resident there, and we don't have a strong network there. So also our contribution couldn't be that great towards the companies. In Africa, we've seen like many very interesting deals, but we haven't made investment yet. So that, I think Africa is actually quite interesting. I think there's quite some markets that are, they have like very ambitious entrepreneurs as well, and so there's definitely things that we can do, but so far we haven't made an investment yet. That's
exciting. I believe you have. I mean, so far I gather you have no intention for America, but I see you expanding to other parts of the world. When you say early stage, what are your basic requirements for a company or an enterprise to qualify to be considered under the Swiss Founders Fund to be pushed and taken to the next level? What are the basic requirements to look at for a company to be admitted?
Yeah, so there's no hard rules, but we like to see some traction. We like to see like some proof of concept at least. So it shouldn't be just like idea stage, but there should be a team. There should be ideally some tech product in very early stage where there's like some sort of like a proof of concept. We like, in terms of business models, we like SaaS products, we like marketplaces in verticals of like property, tech, hospitality, travel, these kind of areas. But so there's not a hard set of rules. In terms of like stage, normally it's like either just the founding team or maybe have some employees, but it's like small teams. We can help them with internationalization. So it's also if like, for instance, we have one company that's called Got Courts. They're very strong in Switzerland. It's a marketplace for tennis court booking, and it's the largest tennis community actually globally. But it's very, very strong in Switzerland and not yet so international in that sense. So we can also help them sort of take to that next level.
Yeah, on a normal day, a tech-focused fund would one of the primary points of focus would be fintech. So far, you mentioned a number of places such as travel, real estate, and all. I was expecting to hear fintech. I didn't hear that. And knowing that you are more of a blockchain/crypto enthusiast, I also didn't hear. Okay, probably we support blockchain-based tech companies or something. You don't foray into those aspects of tech.
Well, okay. So because you were asking about Swiss Founders Fund, so the thing is, I personally have like different hats, and so there's also an entity called First Chain Group, which focuses purely on like crypto and blockchain investments. It's also, I'm a limited partner in Polychain Capital, which is one of the large hedge funds in this space. So I have like significant sort of crypto exposure. We've also in 2016, 17, we've made more than 60 investments, mostly pre-ICO and equity investments in blockchain-based companies. But it's separate from Swiss Founders Fund. So Swiss Founders Fund is purely on like equity investments in sort of economy, and it's like Web 2.0, let's say, and not Web 3.0. And then Web 3.0 is basically a different kind of bucket that we invest through.
All right. I mean, that's exciting to note, considering the fact that, our blockchain space, I personally believe that blockchain technology is the most credible form of technology ever built to date. And we start to prove the naysayers wrong sometime down the line. They should keep talking whilst we keep working. I would like to know, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that thus far SFF has made investments into about 25 companies. I would like to know the distribution what areas, probably percentage-wise, this percentage into real estate, this percentage into travel, and so on?
I don't know exactly, but I'd say it's maybe 40% is in prop tech. So anything that falls into that space. Travel is a bit less. It's like a handful. We also have some outliers. For instance, we also invested into a company called Everphone, which is more kind of like a business marketplace. It's like a fleet management for mobile phones for companies, which wouldn't necessarily fall into like either of these like sort of verticals, but it's still a marketplace, and we particularly really like the team there. So we have like these kind of outliers as well, but I think the largest bucket of about 40% is prop tech investments.
All right, Chris. Thanks a lot for your time, because I remember before setting up this interview, you had to run somewhere for an upcoming meeting. So let me give you my last question, and then we could probably wrap up from there. What are the medium to long-term plans for SFF? I mean, going forward, let's say
long-term plans.
3 to 5 years time, where do we see SFF?
I think we're going to continue on this path of making like these investments. We have more and more deal flow as well, because we've made quite some good investments as well that in companies that are growing really nicely. So we get also a deal flow now from co-investors. So I think we're going to continue on this path. Maybe we're going to make more investments. Right now we make about 4 to 6 investments per year. I think we're going to scale that up a little bit. But I think we're going to continue on this path, and probably in the next 5 years, hopefully we're going to make another 20 to 30 investments so that the portfolio will grow, and hopefully we can support more entrepreneurs, particularly in Europe and Asia, with launching their companies and taking them to the next level.
Thanks a lot, Chris. That's very awesome. I'm sure we would speak on another portfolio of yours in a few moments to come. So I'll have to let you run for your next meeting so that we can.
All right.
We can take it out from there. Thanks a lot for your time, Chris.
Thanks so much for your call. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. All right.